This Little Debbie is better than all other Little Debbies, right? It's the yellow cake in the middle covered in white icing. It's drizzled with red icing, and then they put those little crunchy green sprinkles on the top. It's the greatest Little Debbie that has ever been created. And in my family, that was not really a cookie jar, it was a Little Debbie jar, right? And I knew that when I saw that cookie jar that at some point it was going to be filled with Christmas tree cakes, and the best time of year would happen. So when I was a kid, I would see the cookie jar show up, I would run into the kitchen, I would open up the top and I'd stick in my hand and I'd come up with nothing. And I knew that it wasn't time yet. So I'd put the cookie jar back together, I'd go about my day, and I would begin anticipating tomorrow, right? Because tomorrow I would run into the kitchen, I would open up the cookie jar, I'd stick my hand in and I'd come up with air, right? And I put the cookie jar back together, and all I could think about was tomorrow I get to check again. Tomorrow it might happen. Tomorrow might be the day when the Christmas tree cakes finally show up and Christmas season is officially here. And then after days and days of waiting, finally came the moment when I ran into the kitchen and I opened up the cookie jar and I heard the almighty crinkle, right? And I pulled out the Christmas tree cake and Christmas was finally here and the moment had finally come, right? But all the days leading up to that moment were just filled with this anticipation where I couldn't wait to get through the next day. And I think about myself as a 7 or an 8-year-old waiting for the Christmas tree cakes to show up. And I look at how I was experiencing those days, and every one of those days that I was living where I was finding nothing in the cookie jar, all it was about was getting to the next day, right? It was just, I got to get through this day because tomorrow's another opportunity where it might be full of Christmas tree cakes. And every one of those days and every one of those moments, all I was thinking about was what was coming in the future. My entire thoughts, my entire life, everything about me was filled with the anticipation of if I can just get to tomorrow, maybe tomorrow is it. And I think Christmas time is filled with that kind of anticipation. But the truth that a lot of us know is that that emotion, that anticipation is not just something that happens at Christmas, but that idea and that thought in our hearts happens all year round. That all of us, we have things happening in our life that we're looking forward to a moment maybe where they're not happening anymore. Maybe there's a struggle that's going on in a relationship that we think, man, if I can just get through this, everything's gonna be okay on the other side. Maybe something's going on with a kid of yours and you're like, I know it's just a phase, and if we can just get through this phase, like everything's gonna be better once we get to the other side. Maybe it's a positive change that you hope happens in your life, like a new job or a raise or a promotion or something, and you're like, hey, if I can just get to that point, when I get there, everything's going to be better. And our lives and our minds and our hearts are filled with this anticipation of, man, if I can just get to that point, everything's gonna be okay. If I can just get through today, maybe tomorrow is gonna be the day where it all resolves itself. Sometimes it's spiritually for us. Sometimes it's a sin in our life that we're like, man, I'm struggling with this, but I know if I can just push through, maybe there's gonna come a day where I'm not gonna struggle with this anymore. And we look forward and we kind of push to the future and we anticipate these moments that we think are gonna happen in our life. And if we could just get there, everything would be okay. If we could just get there, that's gonna be the moment where God's gonna be there, we're gonna have faith, and there's gonna finally be a time in our life where we can walk in faith and we can walk forward in faith. And so often what we do is we spend all of our time looking for God in the future and we don't see him in the present. That's what Isaiah is trying to get them to do. Because all of them are like, yes, yeah, we see a moment, okay, in the future where God's gonna glorify us. But we gotta go now, we gotta be exiled, and we gotta make it through all this stuff, and we gotta walk through all these difficult circumstances, and we don't wanna do that. We just wanna get through it, maybe we'll grit our teeth and we'll survive, so we can get to a moment where we can get back with God and everything will be okay. But what Isaiah is saying to them is God is gonna be with you every step of the way. Seek him while he may be found.